Hello to all of our listeners, and welcome back to The Parent Solution, your one-stop shop for all things educational. I'm your host, Kimberly, and today I have a guest with me. Nicholas Davis is the founder of Reclaim Your Premium, a flexible, affordable, and secure health insurance company that focuses around genuinely helping individuals tailor their health insurance to what best fits their needs. RYP is an innovator in the industry with over 50 collective years of insurance experience. Nick is also the father of natural born triplets, which I thought was so very cool. Statistically speaking, triplets are a rarity. They happen to only one in every 1,800 heterosexual and capable couples. Nick, I am so stoked for you to be here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, super fun to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So maybe it would be best to start. I mean, this is the parent solution, and I mean, I understand that you are a parent. Maybe it would be best to start with some of your experiences as a dad.
Yeah, I mean, where do I start?
So
there's
you have
never a
triplets.
dull moment. And
You have triplets. There's a good place to start.
never dull moment with triplets. Yeah. Yeah, it's super duper fun, man. I mean, let's see here. Okay, so first things, when people are like, "Oh my gosh, you have triplets!" Like, "Oh my god," usually it's like, "Wow, are they all the same?" And that was my favorite question when I used to be in engineering world because of my just personality in general, like to joke with people and so on and so forth. Because why not? Like, humor is everywhere in the world. They're like, "Hey, are they the same?" And I was like, no, I had triplets. I didn't have clones. And they're like, oh, damn. I got you. Yeah. So everybody is the same, or sorry, everybody is the same. So everybody is different, which is great. Three completely different personalities and stuff like that. One of the fun things that was kind of fun though is, in the engineering world or whatever, because it's just a lot of these individuals all these folks are like very numbers driven and so on and so forth, and so they would. Early on, it was really funny when they were little bitty. I was like the pilot or test program for quite a few different things. They're like, "Okay, Nick, so if you take your kids to the movie," and I'm like, "Yes." They're like, and I was like, "Look, if I take the girls to the movie, you're gonna have a 33% chance of one of three things happening with your little ones." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And so then I took the girls to the movies. They had a great time, and I was like, "All right, okay, guys. So here's the deal. So you're going to have a 33% chance of one of these three things happening. One, they're going to fall asleep. Two, they're going to endlessly run around the aisles in the movie theater. It's going to be very difficult to get them to sit down. Or three, they're going to snuggle. It's going to be super duper cute, but they're going to be terrified out of their mind when a loud sound happens." And they're like, "Okay, great." And so then those dads with single kids, like singletons, would take their kids to the movie theater and they're like, "Oh my God, yeah, the second one happened. Oh, the first one happened. Oh, no, the third one happened." It was lots of fun. So like little adventures like that. Other adventures, when somebody outgrows shoes, everybody outgrows shoes. When they outgrow clothes, everybody outgrows clothes. So it's three of everything all the time, right, no matter what. And not three of the same thing, three of different things. So like one thing we did really early on, like the girls ended up gravitating towards certain colors, like really, really early on. And we're like, "Oh, you're gravitating towards colors. Cool, that's your color." And now it's like it's just kind of cute, Right. Like prime example, like the store IKEA had. I was just in there one day hanging out as one does in IKEA. Of course, nobody hangs out in IKEA. Anyway, so I was like going through getting some stuff, and then I realized they had these kit hangers that were four different colors. Well, fun fact: three of those four colors was each girl's completely favorite color. So I was like super stoked about that. So that became a cool sorting mechanism for their clothes. Like I would put their clothes in the closet, but they would be on their color hanger. And so Genevieve would come in, for example, she's like, "Oh no, it was green, so it's like my shirt because it's on the green hanger." And then Vera would come in and like, "Oh no, that's the pink hanger, that's my stuff." And then Lindy would come in and she's like, "Oh no, that's the blue hanger, that's my stuff." And then the orange hanger was like, "I don't really know whose it is, you just claim it," So it was kind of fun, like little things like that.
Right. The color coding, that's a good idea. I guess you have to somehow be able to tell the difference between whose is whose, right? Are they, if you don't mind me asking, are they fraternal or are they identical? I know fraternal triplets are much more common.
Both.
Oh,
Yeah, both.
okay.
Yeah. So basically, okay, so genetically speaking, how it all happens, right? Okay, so going backwards, I've got a standing subscription to the England Journal of Medicine just because I read medical journals for fun, because why not, right?
Right.
So when I found
Why
out
not?
that we were having triplets, yeah, exactly. Well, right. Well, fair enough. So basically, okay, so week 8, right? So my ex and I were pregnant, so on and so forth. Week 8, I'll go to the sonographer, and the sonographer's like, "Cool. Well, what do you see?" And I'm like, "Is that two sides to the same bean? Because it looks like a copy bean." And he was like, "Nope, that's fraternal twins." And I'm like, I was like, "Oh, my little sisters are identical twins, so this is perfect. Yeah, easy peasy. I know how to work with twins, no problem." Right? My ex, on the other hand, there's no multiples in her entire family line, so she was like, "What is this?" Right? So I was like, "Okay, no big deal." Didn't think twice of it, right? So week 10 happens. We do our second ultrasound. Same thing, right? And then we had another one at, I think, week 15, I think, was our next. I don't know if we had one between week 10 and week 15, but I know it was week 15 was like the big one, right? So week 15, have another ultrasound, right? And then so the sonographer's like, she's scanning for like, different things because there's twins, yeah, at this point in time, as far as she knows. And she's like, "Okay, we got to scan for like skeletal abnormalities, like scoliosis and things of that nature." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." So she's scanning and she's like, "All right, all right, all right." So she starts at the bottom and she's like, "All right, cool. There's baby A." And then, oh, there's a baby B with baby A. And, baby C. "Congratulations, you guys. You're having triplets." And we're like, "What?" So sometime between week 10 and week 15, one of the eggs split for fun. So started out fraternal and then one split for fun. And then we have triplets, right? So
Wow.
when I tell people that, they're like, "I didn't know like eggs could split that late in the game." And I'm like, "Yeah, apparently they can, because they did, crazy
Right.
stuff."
Yeah.
So yeah, totally nuts.
That is crazy. I was doing a little bit of reading on how triplets can occur and that sort of stuff just before we met for this podcast here. And yeah, it seems like, I mean, that particular point of conversation was not necessarily brought up, but it seems like you have either like three separate eggs, and that's how you have fraternal triplets, or you have like one egg that splits into three, which means you have identical triplets. And the one egg splitting into three is apparently much more rare than three separate eggs, and having three separate eggs. So I thought that was interesting. So you kind of got like a mix of both. So does that mean that two of them
I did.
look very much alike?
Yeah. So
The
how it
other one does
happens
not?
medically? Yeah, no, totally. So how it happens medically is there's a recessive gene called a dual ovulation gene, right? And just to give you the idea of the statistical probability of its occurrence and your sippy system and so on and so forth, right? Essentially, you've got about the same statistical probability of that happening as a random red-haired child popping into a blonde couple or blonde or brunette couple, so on and so forth, right? Just to give you an idea of statistical abnormalities, right? So this dual ovulation gene is passed on from mother to father to daughter, because obviously girls are the only ones that can, worry about it, because all it means is you throw down two eggs very frequently until before you're 35, right? Because typically after 35, you start throwing down two eggs, no big deal, right? But before, that's the dual ovulation gene, right? Now, so happened to be she threw down two eggs, both got fertilized right time, right place, right time situation, and then one split for fun, and then ta-da, we have that. So as far as all my research is, all the medical journals and so on and so forth, as far as that goes, fraternal twins can be inherited because it is a genetic deal to drop two eggs, right? No big deal, right? So fraternal twins can be inherited. Identical twins, however, are still considered spontaneous in nature. There are still several people doing research over it. I think the last I heard was out in Cambridge, I want to say. And they can prove it in a lot of different mammals that certain kinds of sperm will cause an egg to split, but they can't successfully prove it in humans yet. And so because it's still so random, they haven't like officially concluded. So that's how identical twins happen. Identical twins are medically considered spontaneous in nature. So it was half spontaneous, half inherited.
Half inherited. Very nice, very nice. Well, you sound pretty lucky.
Very, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of like what we're here to chat about today, I mean, I'm definitely very interested in the fact that that you have this sort of lifestyle that's available to you. It like you said, it kind of multiplies everything by three. How has how does that work with school? I imagine like, do they typically all end up in the same class? Like, I mean, if they go to public school, are they typically all in the same class? Do they like different things in school? How does that work?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, you keep in mind they're three different people, so they're definitely like three different things. When it comes down to school, what the ex and I figured out is, is it's okay. Okay, so it's a little bit of both, right? So you want them to develop personality wise and so on and so forth. That's a big deal, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes they can't do that with their sisters around because they're their sisters. They see them all the time, right? On the other hand, managing all of three different levels of the same level of homework, but just in three different areas can get kind of cumbersome. So my ex went ahead and made it an executive decision, parenthetically quoted, to keep them all in the same class, which is cool. I guess it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool for the kids. They love it actually, since they get along very, very, very well, and they're all best friends for life, obviously. So it's not an issue. And it's pretty cute sometimes. Sometimes like one will help the other out in the middle of class or whatever, and it's just kind of cute. Starting next year in middle school though, because they're in fifth grade right now, starting next year in middle school, they'll all three be in separate classes. So they split them up for middle school, but for elementary school, and basically like kindergarten through fifth grade, essentially, they kept them in the same class so that way the coursework would be all the same for all three kids. It's easier to review homework with all three kids. Makes a little bit more sense managerially speaking. And then also for the girls, it's kind of fun. So I'll go volunteer at their school from time to time. And when I do that, it's a program we have down here called Watchdog Program. Stands for Dads of Great Students. And so basically, because there's not a lot of dudes in the school system in general, right? So basically, it's dads can come down and volunteer at the school and just kind of need just to like patrol the hallways, like security checks, just have another dude in the school because for example, like, some kids don't have a father figure in the family, so having
Hmm.
another father figure around is kind of cool for them, right? Also, fun things, which, I focus in, that's my specialty. I give copious amounts of high fives throughout the entire day. I volunteered just like last week, I want to say, and I think I gave maybe 5 or 600 high fives. I'm like, not even like exaggerating on that. And then like random kids will come out to me at the playground and, they'll be like, can you play catch with me, Mr. Watchdog? And I'm like, yes, I'd love to, no problem.
Oh,
And
that's
then I'll go
cute.
visit the girls' class. It's really fun. Yeah, it's super fun. Helping out the kids and so on. So it's a really, really, really cool time. Giving high fives to kindergartners as they're running back and forth, and helping out at lunch times. I'll go over there and I'll like walk over to somebody's lunch table. I'm like, okay, stuff. Does anybody have any stuff for me to open? Like, milks, like yogurt things, anything. You need some help opening anything. And they're like, oh, Mr. Watchdog, pick me. And then I'll do that. And then usually in the morning, I'll run around with also, stop at the executive desk or whatever. And I'll grab they'll give me like a big huge thing of pencils, which is like currency in elementary school, basically.
Of course.
And then they'll also give me the actual currency for the school, which is their mascot is an owl, right? So they give me these things called booty cash, basically, right? That the kids have to earn. And so I'll run around and I'll give booty cash out to kids as like random acts of kindness, basically, right? So like first fist bump of the day, or like first solid high five of the day, or hey, you helped your friend, or you helped a classmate with this, or you're very sweet with this, or stuff like that. I would get booty cash for stuff like that, right? But then I would go to the different classes with the pencils, and I would have a dad joke, and I would present the dad joke in the form of the riddle, which is lots of fun. And anybody who can guess it correct gets a pencil, which is lots of fun. And then I would start pitting the grades against each other, which is just endless amounts of entertainment, mind you. But because all the girls are in one class, it makes that way easier to do, which is very, very cool. And so, like, for example, like I'll go to their fifth grade class and I'm like, all right, girls, or sorry, I was like, all right, everybody in the class. And I was like, okay, so you mind if, I'll ask the teacher, I'm like, hey, is it cool if I do if somebody can solve a riddle for a pencil? And she's like, oh, no, for sure, for definitely. I'm like, all right, cool. So I hop in there and I give a dad joke. Like, for example, like, what did the green grape say to the purple grape? And they would give me all sorts of answers and so on and so forth, right? And of course, the answer is take a breath, which is lots of fun. Because
That is definitely a dad joke. That is
yes,
definitely a dad joke.
it's a groaner, but it's fun. So I'll just do like quirky stuff like that, which is really, really fun. So it makes it easy to do when the girls are in the same classroom.
Hmm.
Also, um, I can see developmentally it's a little different, because like the girls have their own friends and stuff like that. And sometimes it's like, the other thing I do with the girls, because it's, they're all, I have three, obviously. So every Wednesday I'll do a daddy daughter date night. So I'll take a different girl out to dinner every single Wednesday. So they still have that one-on-one daddy daughter time because they don't get that like ever, except for
Hmm.
daddy daughter date night. And so
Right.
so I'll do that, and sometimes during the daddy dirty date nights, it's like, oh, well, you're stealing my friend, or, my friend wants to do this, but I feel left out because of da 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 da. And I can kind of
Hmm.
like on the dad level come in and like mitigate some of those things. And it's like, look, sweetie pea, like if your sisters go off and play with somebody, that's cool. Don't worry about it. You can go off and play with somebody too. They're like, but they're playing with the person that I want to play with too. And they just left. And I'm like, and what did you do? Like, I just stood there, use your legs and follow them. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, they didn't do that. I was like, sweetie pea, no, they didn't do that because they're upset with you. They're just moving quicker than you are sometimes. It happens to everybody. And she was like, oh, okay. And so, like, little parental squashing here and there, which really helps out a lot too.
Hmm.
And so, like, little things like that, I'm luckily, blessed enough to do with the kids too, which is really, really fun. So, I mean, there's a bunch of like little side quirky things, it's just kind of fun.
Amazing, amazing. It sounds like they keep you pretty busy. I mean, one child keeps you pretty busy, but you have that times three. And then they're
Yes.
all the same age. A plus side I can imagine, maybe until they hit teenagers or they hit that teenager stage. A plus side is
Mm-hmm.
that they kind of go through the same growing phases, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like you said, every child is different, right? But like in terms of like clothes and shoes and things like that, it's not like
Yeah.
you one is in this size and one is in this size, and for the most part, they're kind of all
For the
together
most
that
part,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that
like
would be a
Genevieve is
plus.
like a size or half a size smaller than Lindy and Vera sometimes, but
Hmm.
it goes back and forth.
Hmm. So they're in public school then.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Very cool. And how do their teachers feel? I mean, I guess if they're all in the same class this year, it's just one teacher. How do their teachers feel having them in the same class?
Yeah, they think it's great. They think it's fine. They actually do like for fifth grade at their school, they circle between I think like three or four different teachers, so they are changing rooms and stuff like that. But they
Hmm.
all go together to those things, and so it's kind of fun. For the girls though, I mean, it's like okay, so there are two different ways to address the girls, basically, right? So you can address them by their name, of course, which obviously is a thing. Or if you're like introducing them, it's like usually like, oh, it's the triplets. Okay, cool. And so it's like the girls like kind of like it's a mix of both. Like they lose a little bit of identity when you're like, oh, the triplets, but then they gain
Hmm.
notoriety because it's like the triplets, right?
Hmm.
And then so I remember one time I was like, because I make videos for work, I make a video every week, right? So like one time I was like, hey girls, who wants to be on my? Anybody want to be on my video for this week? I was like, you'll be famous, and they're like, Dad, we're already famous, and I'm like, well played, girls, well played, and you're right, you are,
The
because everywhere they
savagery,
go, they're like, oh my god, I've never seen triplets before. And the girls are like, yes, yes, this is us. We are
the
triplets. We exist. There are
savagery.
three of us. Yeah.
That's too funny. That's too funny. They must get that from you, the sense of humor.
Yes.
That's
Very much so.
hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah, I've seen your videos. They're very funny. I always enjoy watching them. Always. Yeah, you're quite the comedian. I will say that. Quite the comedian. Must be that dad joke thing.
Oh yeah, life's too short not to have fun.
Yes, yes, 100% agree. So they typically like with them, you said that they have different kind of friend groups that they go off with. They might have some in common, but for the most part, they have different friend groups.
To an extent, yeah, to an extent.
Mhm.
Like sometimes, like, and I could see it being like pseudo difficult for their friends because their friends are like, okay, look, so I'd like to be friends with you specifically. However, you come attached with two other people. So I got to be kind of cool with that. So then like a lot of their friends are like, some of their friends are like cool with like, hey, any one of you guys I'm super cool with, right? But then certain friends are like, oh no, I want to hang out with just Vera or just Lindy or just JB. And then
Right.
the other two feel left out. And so I'm like, well, sweetie peas, look, it's a big deal. Like, yes, you are triplets, and yes, you do just about everything together. However, sometimes one will have a different friend than the other, and that's okay to split off and be fun because then you can have your own friend as well. They're like, but I don't want any other friends. And I'm like, sweetie pea, I get it. No big deal.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like, you know, and they're like, so sometimes that's a little bit of a thing, but most of the time we're able to work through it pretty well.
Right. Trying to teach them. And I guess at that point it would kind of be like regular siblings, right? You're trying to teach them to like have their
Mm-hmm.
own friends and their own friend groups. It's just a little bit difficult because they are all the same age, right?
Age, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's
and they're
something,
and they're
like
all in the same class with all the same people. Yeah.
yeah, with all the same people, right? And so maybe like,
Uh-huh.
because you're right, they are three different people and they have three very different personalities. I'm sure they like different things and they like to like do
Mm-hmm.
different things. Or one may like a
Mm-hmm.
certain activity more than the other one, and that might just jive better with certain kids,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I
Yeah.
can see the challenge. I'm a family of
Mm-hmm.
three as well. I'm the oldest of three in my family. And so for myself, but we were all apart, right? There's myself, then there's my brother who's 16 months younger than I am, and then my sister who's 6 years younger than I am. So our social circles were pretty
Mm-hmm.
different. We never really had that challenge. I can see how that would be a huge challenge with kids that are the same age like that.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. It is, it's kind of funny too, because it's like, as much as I hate to like like I cringe because it's, as a parent, you're eventually going to come up with this stuff, you know what I mean? You're eventually going to hit this wall with parenthood. But like relationships with dudes, and I'm like, no, you know,
And you
like,
as the dad,
dude,
get the
I was
shotgun
like,
out.
no. Yeah,
Get the shotgun out.
literally. Like what one of my buddies is like, "Are you a good shot?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Get better." And I'm like, "Whatever, dude." And he's like, "No, but I'm serious. Your kids are pretty." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you."
But
Um, and
you
so
can take
like
it as a
prime
compliment, I
example, like for
suppose.
well, exactly, yeah. I was like, "Well, thank you," So then like I remember I was over there for watchdog duty on this past one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Vera is like obsessed with cats. She loves cats more than anything on the planet, right? I mean, aside from her dad, of course.
Of course.
um, yes, 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 right. So, essentially, like she's asked her mom for a cat. Her mom's like, no, 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 no. She's asked me for a cat, and I'm like, look, sweetie pea, it's just not a good idea at the moment, right? So then this dude in her class walks up to me during recess. I am deadpan serious. And he's like, Mr. Davis? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so Vera's birthday's coming up soon. And I'm like, yes. And he's like,
Oh
is
boy.
it okay if I get her a cat for her
Oh
birthday? And I'm
boy.
like,
Oh
I was like,
no.
no,
Oh
no, not at
no.
all. And he's like, well, that's no, I mean, are you sure, Mr. Davis? And I'm like, yes. Well, he can live just at your house. And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, I mean, if food's a problem, I'll get you a whole bunch of food too. Don't worry about that. And I'm like, it's not that. There's other things going on. Thank you very much, though. He's like, okay. And I'm like, all right. And so I'm like, what is this? So then I walk over here. I was like, Vera, who's that dude? She's like, oh, it's Mason. And I'm like,
He just
he wants
offered
to
to
buy
buy
you a
her.
cat? She's like, yeah. And she's like, yeah. Um, and I was like, that's not a, she's like, oh no, 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 he's my friend. And I'm like, okay. And so like, as you can probably hear through the recording, like my gazing, like piercing dad stare,
Of
like,
course.
whoosh. I was like,
Of course.
seriously, you
Yeah.
know? And then so later that day, like the next day was daddy daughter date night. It was Lindy's daddy daughter date night. So Lindy and Vera are identicals. And so I was like, Lindy, she's like, yeah. I was like, so that kid that offered the cat, she's like, oh yeah, Mason. And I'm like, yeah. So what's that about? And she's like, well, he wanted to do something nice for Vera. And I'm like, is he trying to are you trying to be Vera's boyfriend or something? And she's like, no. And I'm like, no. And she's like, and that's what I said too. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then so it's like, and so I was like, so why the cat? She's like, well, he asked me, like, what could he do for Vera? And I was like, hey, Vera likes cats. And he's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sweetie Pea, you got to be careful with that information, love. And she was like, oh, yeah? And I'm like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, dudes are different. Like, we'll have the conversation again when you're a little bit older, but, like, big deal. And she's like, okay, yeah, thanks, Dad. I didn't know that. And I'm like, no, yeah, of course. It's no big
This
deal.
is
No big
this
deal.
is good. This
And
is
so,
good.
like, yeah. So, like, dudes, like, future dudes will have to go through a screening for two other sisters to, like, even just date one girl, which is kind of fun at the same, like, for me anyway, to, like, watch
Right.
these dudes struggle for a little bit, you know? Um,
Right.
it'd be pretty interesting, though, you know? Then it's, yeah,
Once they go through the other sisters, then they've got to go through you. That's the final one.
exactly right.
How old are your
Exactly right. Yep.
girls, if I may
They're
ask?
10.
They're 10. Okay, yeah, that's too young.
Hmm.
But that's cute. I mean,
Way too
like
young. Yeah.
whoever the boy is, like, I mean, at least his parents are raising him right to go and ask before you do something like that, right? That's like him coming and asking you if that's okay. He obviously recognizes the importance of that sort of decision. So I mean, his heart's
Yes.
probably in the right place. That's a really cute story. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for
Yeah, for sure.
sharing. Yeah. In terms of, because I mean, this is the parent solution, and we are about homeschooling and education and whatnot. We've chatted a little bit about what their public school education has been. Have they recently
Hmm.
just gone back to school this year? Like, have schools stayed open in your area this year? What has the schooling situation looked like?
Sure. So in 2020, there was no, let's see here, they're in fifth grade. So fourth, third. So yeah, when they were in third grade,
Mm-hmm.
it was all virtual, right? And they were moving towns at the same time. So it was all virtual, and then they ended up moving to the new town, no big deal, right? And then in fourth grade is the first year they started at their new school that they're at right now. And a little bit of it, like the first, like, maybe I want to say almost half the year was primarily virtual, give or
Mm-hmm.
take. And it was like, and I felt like that like wasn't as good. However, their mom is also a teacher. And so
Ah,
she would go through and like help teach them some things too. And then also I would help as well. So it's a big difference with like parents that are helping versus parents that aren't helping. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Yes.
Um, so there was that. And like the last half of fourth grade, like they all like it was probably even less than half. Sorry, they spent more than half of fourth grade in school, actually. Like more than half of fourth grade in school. Their school was open because they're in a little teeny weeny town, and so it was like totally fine, you know. Um, so like that was basically like most of the school in most of the class in fourth grade was like normal for them. If that makes sense, as far as education catching up, so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now in fifth grade, everything's it's completely back to normal. There's no whatever. There's no like virtual nothing. It's all in person, like it's like it's basically supposed to be, which is great, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
so the kids are going in, they're learning really, really, really great. I did notice, however, that because of the virtual stuffs, they didn't get a grasp in certain subject as well as they could, and
Mm-hmm.
the school recognizes that, so they have like a 30 or 45-minute period of time during the middle of the day after one of the classes or whatever, and they call it win time. And so whatever subject the student is doing the least best in, if that makes sense,
Yep.
they're like, cool, you go to a tutor for that section. And so they have tutoring inside
Nice.
of the school for that,
Nice.
which is
Nice.
really cool. And so I agree with that. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've talked with the teachers, they're pretty good too. And then as far as parenting wise as well, so I have ADHD and pinch of autism, dyslexia, all the fun things, all the cool comorbidities that just like come with ADHD for fun,
All the
um,
additional
and
labels.
my kids do. You what?
I said all the additional labels that people want to throw at you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like not even so much about that. It's just how your brain works.
Yeah, of
I
course,
spent
of
like the
course.
vast majority of 2021 like going through all of that to figure out how all of that works, right? Now,
Hmm.
the cool part about that is now I get to help my kids because my kids are going through the same stuff. And
Right.
so all of them, and it's and at varying different levels too, which is very interesting too. Um, and so like prime example, like Lindy's my little mini me. God bless her. She's the best in the universe. And so I'm like, hey, sweetie pea. So like on daddy and her date nights, I'm like, so what in school did you not understand? She's like, Well, okay. Sometimes when the teacher says this and this and this, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, that makes more sense, sweetie pea. So tell me what you understand. Like, okay, well, this. So then I would go and I would just be giving her ADHD hacks essentially to like help her learn better in school. And those little tidbits they go a million miles. Like prime example, she's just like, hey, when something's, prime example, when the teacher says something, like I can remember the first part of it, but I can't, and I can remember the last part of it, but I can't remember the middle part of it. And that really, I don't understand. And that hit hard for me because that was a thing for me, specifically in school. When I was in college, it was a huge deal. And so I was like, sweetie pea, here's a trick. And so I would like show her different tricks. So like, for example, I'm like, you have, I was like, you can, rub your fingers together like this, or you can do something at the same time that's happening. Because the thing is, your brain is too bored and it's tuning out for just a pinch of it. And it's like, oh yeah, we're here again. She's like, oh really?
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah. So you have to keep your brain like moving quickly the entire time. And sometimes when things get boring out here, you have to make it interesting back here to like offset that. And she was like, oh, okay. And I was like, so if you have a pencil, rub the pencil in your hands, rub the pencil on your leg, like, you can. I'm trying not to do things that make too much noise because it'll ask you to stop eventually.
Of
Because
course.
it's, we make noise and we don't realize we're making noise, which is lots of fun. It's like, hey, you're twiddling, like so on and so forth, right? So I told her those things, and she tried to implement them, and then after she did, she started getting better, which is great. So there's the girls have lots of support. They have the public school system, which is it is what it is. But then inside the school system, there's actually some teachers that actually just do really really care. So that's important. And so
Hmm.
they've got that and that, and then they have both of their parents. Even though we're in separate households, we still very much care about the kids and getting them the best education possible in any way, shape, or form possible.
Hmm.
And on the mom side of the fence, it's straight education. She's neurotypical, so she doesn't understand how the brains. It does none of this makes sense to her. But
Right.
then on dad's side of the fence, everything's neurodivergent, and so then they're like, "Hey, dad, so blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Yes." They're like, "Why do you understand everything so well?" And I'm like, "Baby girl, we have the same brain." And they're like,
Right.
"Oh, that's right." And I was like, "It's a superpower, but you got to know how to use it, or you'll fall way behind." And they're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay."
Use it to your
So it's really
advantage.
really fun. Mm-hmm,
I
exactly.
think I think that's amazing that you are taking the responsibility upon yourself to responsibly co-parent, and to make sure that the best is provided, for your growth, whatever that looks like. I know in terms
Mm-hmm.
of teachers, I know a lot of teachers. Now, I am very much against the system itself of public school just because of things that have gone on, and I just don't think that it's the answer for a lot of kids, in terms of
Sure.
setting them up for success and for their future. But in terms of the teachers, most of them, I would say, that I know that are operate in my circle, anyways, they're very caring individuals. They really want their kids to do the best that they can. They want to set them up for success, and that's very difficult, I feel, for them to be able to do, within the system. A lot of the teachers that I know are veteran teachers, so they've been in the system for 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that there are some young ones, even ones that I went to teachers college with. Now those are few and far between, but some young ones that are my
Right.
age, that are bound and determined to like make a difference. So that really, really encourages. That is very encouraging to hear, that your kids are getting such a wide range of, or the widest range possible, within the public
Mm-hmm.
education system. I know that
Absolutely.
the government of Ontario, a lot of the government in Canada, and a lot of the ministry in the U.S. as well. They threw additional funds, at tutoring, and they actually put in school tutoring for this year, and a little bit for last year as well. So there's a lot of kids that I know, and a lot of kids that I see that are in tutoring in school because the government has provided those sorts of funds, which is
Mm-hmm.
that's the right decision to make. I feel if you have you should have the additional funds to spend on education, so spend it on the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where it should
Yeah.
be going. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing, Nicholas. Thank you so much, for taking the time today. Thank you for chatting with me. I really appreciate your time and attention today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
That is all for this week's episode of The Parent Solution. If you have any comments or questions, either about this issue or others that have come up for you, you can always find me on social media. It's Star Students on Facebook and LinkedIn, or starstudents.learning on Instagram. You can also reach out through email, which is all over social media channels. Thank you, as always, so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.